Welcome to This Week in Surgery Centers. If you're in the ASC industry, then you're in the right place. Every week, we'll start the episode off by sharing an interesting conversation we had with our featured guest, and then we'll close the episode by recapping the latest news impacting surgery centers. We're excited to share with you what we have, so let's get started and see what the industry's been up to. Hi, everyone. Here's what you can expect on today's episode. When it comes to strategic partnerships, surgery centers have many options to choose from, but timing is everything. Blake Peart is the Managing Director of Vertess, and he's on the show this week to chat about when it is the right time to consider a strategic partner, key indicators that it's time, potential benefits and advantages, and how to identify the right partner. In our news recap, we'll cover National Nurses Month, regional anesthesia, the latest breakthrough in AI imaging, and of course, end the news segment with the positive story about the first RSV vaccine. For those of you who stopped by the booth at ASCA a few weeks ago or attended either of our sessions, thank you for spending a few minutes of your time with us in Louisville. And next week's episode that will come out on June 6th will be a full ASCA recap, so make sure to tune in. Hope everyone enjoys the episode, and here's what's going on this week in surgery centers.
Blake, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Can you tell us to start a little bit about your firm, Vertess, and where you guys focus in terms of working with ASCs?
Absolutely. So Vertess is a M&A firm. It's a kind of an intermediary firm, we call it, which we're part of the facilitation process of taking someone to market. We do about 90% sell side work and maybe about 10% buy side work. So our focus is primarily on the sell side. So when a person wants to go to market, they want to either sell their business completely or they want to do a recap, have a strategic partner come in. We're a great group to basically start at evaluating them at first, give them a full evaluation of what we feel their company will bring to the market, trends and comps. We do a full evaluation with this. At that point in time, if they decide to, sign with us with the other information we presented on how we take people to market, what's unique about us, then we'll take them on board and go through the whole entire process. It's a pretty lengthy process, about 6 to 8 months to sell someone and to get them to find the right buyer for them. So yeah,
great.
So it's a difficult process.
Okay, thanks for that overview. And there's so much going on, Blake, right now in the ASC industry in particular as it relates to consolidation, capital inflows, acquisitions, partner buyouts. What do you think is driving this influx of capital and increased interest within the ASC segment of healthcare in particular?
No, it's a great question. And part of it is it goes back for a number of years, and then you have this current changes in the recent years that have really facilitated this growth in the markets and on both the seller and buyer side. So right now they estimate there's about $1.8 trillion in private equity at the moment that's sitting there. And so this is something, obviously there's a lot of investors, venture capital, a lot of strategics out there that are looking to acquire ASCs as one part of a healthcare platform. And so there's a lot of opportunity with this. What I've seen from my perspective as someone who was an operator of ASCs for a number of years, we acquired some privately owned ASCs for the large strategic company that I represented. And we saw, what the benefits were when a group of physicians, surgeons had kind of reached that point in their life where they're thinking, where can we take this from here? How can we grow further? How can we create the right retirement for ourselves? Well, how can we create the right legacy for ourselves? How can we take some chips off the table that now we're having to address on our own where we can get some support with these issues? And so that's something that we're able to bring to the table as far as finding a strategic partner. That's a very important option for them. The key is what's the right partner for you and what are the terms of finding that right partner? And I think that's where we're able to help people, direct them and find that right niche. To your point about what's changed recently, well, we had this little thing called COVID. And if you know, ASCs were probably hit the hardest during that process, meaning, obviously a lot of elective procedures. So depending on what state you're in with lockdowns and some of the regulations, you may have been hit harder than other places. And so With that being said, a lot of even some of the larger players who are still privately owned who were thinking, we really don't want to be acquired. We like how things are being run at this moment. Now we're saying, how do we mitigate some of this risk? We took a really hard hit, and how do we start to take some chips off the table, have another company come in that can help absorb some of these risks that we had to endure all of our on ourselves. And a lot of surgery centers probably owned were decimated. I mean, some never recovered. So this has also really pushed the movement to this to kind of have that acquisition process move forward. That I think just came from some of the experiences with COVID. And then some of it's just a matter of you're getting punished for good behavior. You've grown it to a point to where, as a surgeon, you're having to address a lot of issues that really that's not what you went to school for. You make money doing surgeries. No one else can do that but you. And when you're sitting here playing HR director, office manager, and you're having to go through all these different things with ASC, it's probably time to find a partner that can help you mitigate through those processes.
Got it. That's helpful in terms of getting the lay of the land in terms of the different trigger points. And do you think that those kind of trigger points and dynamics that you mentioned are driving more, M&A activity, more strategic partner interest in ASCs versus other segments of healthcare? Or do you see these general trends kind of going on within the healthcare landscape overall?
I think it's overall, but when you start looking at certain lanes, you'll see it elevated and then less than others. For instance, urgent cares, just an example, they did very well during COVID. But those numbers were rather artificially inflated, right? So I wrote an article a while back on, what's reoccurring and non-reoccurring COVID revenue, how do buyers look at this and say, how do we look at a business and know they've recovered well? These are true numbers now, and exposed to what they were getting at one point in time. That was very unique. That's not going to be repeated, at least we hope not. And so this is something that I think that some businesses had to wait a while. 22 was a very good litmus test for a lot of businesses, including ASCs, on how they recovered, how they ramped back up. And it kind of went through that because everyone basically judges things pretty much on a 12-month trailing EBITDA and revenues, margins. So they want to see that bandwidth go through, that those things have been alleviated, they've kind of gone back to what's normal. And so now this is a great time for them to move forward. 22 was not a good year for M&A for primarily a lot of those reasons. Interest rates, risk of a recession, all the things that we were dealing with. But you didn't have enough time really to measure what was happening from 20 to 21. And so buyers were more skeptical and much guarded as far as moving forward in those directions. But now we've kind of gone past that.
Sure. And coming out of that, Blake, I want to ask you a little bit about ASC valuations at a high level, from our audience that doesn't talk about M&A and valuation every day. What are some of the key high level factors that go into ASC valuations?
Sure. No, great question. So first of all, let's say a traditional transaction. You've got a company that we feel, let's say we've got maybe 10 surgeons on board. They're producing, let's say $40 million, $45 million in revenue with an EBITDA of somewhere maybe around $6-7 million. For the sake of math here, we'll say $5 million EBITDA, which is probably a little bit higher with that kind of revenue. But what you see, the higher the revenue that you're going to have with the center, typically the higher the valuation is going to be and the higher the multiple for that valuation. Because an investor knows they're going to not only make their money back, they can make it back quicker, and they can, it's going to be a greater valuation as far as multiples. So, when you're starting to see things with valuation of 60, 80, $100 million, you're starting to really look at some high multiples of EBITDA. We're talking 7, 8, 9, 10 sometimes, when you start really dissecting it. When you start looking at smaller surgery centers, let's say it's $5 million, $6 million in revenue, maybe $1.5 million, $2 million in EBITDA, maybe it's 1 or 2 physicians. Typically, those are still very well desired, but they're going to be a little more conservative on the valuation because any buyer is going to see this as a little more risk. You've maybe got 2 physicians, 3 physicians. What's the chances of maybe they take some chips off the table, they roll back 20%, but at the same time, maybe they go a little soft. Maybe they don't want to work as hard as they did. Maybe one wants to retire. That's 1/3 or 2/3 of your entire workforce. So it has more risk in it. And of course, being less revenue, you're going to have less money built up on that as far as in the next 2 to 3 years when they may want to turn that over or flip it. A lot of times, a private equity group will come in, they'll roll back money, they want to maintain that workforce that's there, and then they'll grow it maybe two, three, four times, and then they can flip it to a strategic. And that's when a strategic will come in because typically they have a higher level of discretion on what they will purchase. They like a little bit higher number of revenue, a little more certainty to acquire them. And so that's typically the kind of the standard, if you will. Sometimes it's broken, sometimes it's not. But for the most part, that's pretty much the standard that you see as far as how valuations are done. So, higher earnings of ASCs, good EBITDAs, run well, got to always bring higher multiples. Lower revenue, maybe under 10 million revenue, they're going to have a little bit lower multiple, but still greatly desired. It really has a lot to do with the stability of the position force that you have on it.
Great. And so it sounds kind of at the highest level, it's the EBITDA, which is kind of a proxy for the profitability of the facility, and some kind of multiple on that, which at a high level, might be in the 7 to 10x range. Did I get that right?
That's correct. That's right. And again, the higher usually the valuation that comes out with the ASC, typically the higher the multiple will be for that ASC.
Yep, that makes sense. One thing you mentioned earlier, Blake, that I wanted to kind of circle back to is this concept or this term strategic partner. And I hear this term strategic partner thrown out there. And I feel like sometimes it can mean different things, or sometimes it can be a little bit confusing. In the case of ASCs in the M&A landscape that we're talking about, what does strategic partner typically mean? What does that mean to you?
It's a great question, and sometimes I use it for two different definitions. One, we could say strategic buyer is typically a very specific buyer that is very much in the ASC space. They are without naming them, you know who they are, the big players out there. And those people come in and they are looking to add an ASC, and they're going to add it to the portfolio. They have a very good pulse on the landscape, the geographics, the circumstances within that location, and they want a footprint. They want to be able to get some access there. They probably maybe they're working and partnering with a hospital system, so they have a very good plan about how they come in. And a lot of times they like to do like a 49, 51%, 49% physician owned, 51%, and this part of it, that's what they do. I've worked with those companies before, and maybe they even partner with a hospital system for supply chain, reductions and network payer reductions and rates. So that is really kind of the definition of strategic. It's a very specific company. That's what they do. So those names out there when you say them, you know who they are, and that's what they do. Then you've got PE groups and other groups like that you may be utilizing that may be in that lane, but they're kind of a platform. They're building a platform, they're doing some add-ons to it, and they do like to roll over, of course. They really like the team to stay on board. And then they're usually going to, within 3 to 5 years, they're going to flip it usually maybe to a strategic for another sale. So they built it up. Maybe it wasn't quite ready for that strategic, or for whatever reason was being passed on a strategic. They're going to fill in all the holes, fill in all the gaps, get it perfect, and then usually they'll sell it off. They usually don't maintain it for a long, long period of time. So that's kind of the difference in those two. Now, when I use the word strategic, sometimes I'm referring to meaning what's right for you, what's right for that buyer. And sometimes it is a PE, sometimes it is a big strategic buyer. And, and that all depends on what the physicians, the owners at that time want. I mean, if they want to stay on board and they want to be a part of this and they want to grow it, and maybe they're not quite meeting the revenue standards they can, and they want to have a lot of control over the process and control over it afterwards, maybe the best thing would be a great private equity group to come in. A strategic, just, by rule, typically they kind of have a very well-oiled process. But, and although you may be very much a part of that process, they're going to pretty much take over a lot of the overall operations and everything completely. Now,
Yeah.
for some physician groups, that's great. They don't want to do it,
Right.
but some don't want to lose that control. So this is why bringing in a company like Vertess is important, because everyone talks about valuation. Everyone talks about what I'm going to get from my company. But at the end of the day, those valuations, when you narrow it down to 3 or 4 of those buyers, they're going to be so close.
Hmm.
That's all going to be relevant. It's going to be how that money's paid out. Is it earn out, things like that, how much cash it flows. Those things are all negotiable, and you're going to get tight with all those factors. What's different is the terms of it. So what does that mean as far as what's the rollover percentage? What's going to be the employment agreements for each one of these positions? Are you going to keep the existing operators on board? Are you going to put someone on the board? Are you going to make sure you have certain control facets in this? So do you have a say so when this gets sold to who that buyer may be? Those are all terms that have to be negotiated. That makes a big difference sometimes between a real strategic buyer and maybe a private equity. And I'm not pro or far either one, because I think they both fit with that right seller. But it's making sure you navigate through those waters and you don't drown in the process of getting through it, and find the right person that works best for you.
Yeah, those seem like really important considerations, because, as you said, valuation, that's an important part of it. But a lot of times in this ASC space, these physician owners are staying involved in some form or fashion, and a lot of times kind of highly involved. And so the go forward operating model, the ownership structure, the governance structure, the operational processes, and the people, it seems like it can kind of vary widely depending on the type of partner or the type of investor.
True, and always remember, I always tell my physicians or the owners of the ASC is the best part about the valuation and the money that we come to is going to be when you close and you see that money hit your account. However, the terms are what you're going to live with every day for the next years to come by.
Yeah.
And so that really is more important when it comes down to it, because that valuation is going to be very close no matter who you choose. It's going to be very close if you're running a really good tight bidding process through, which is what we do a really good job with. But those terms is what you're going to have to really negotiate, and make sure you don't have any potholes down the road that you didn't see. That like I say, the fine print. Make sure we've gone through all this process, and that's what's going to get you through it and make you a happy exchange down the road.
Yep. You mentioned earlier some of the potential benefits of taking on an investor or strategic partner. You mentioned, hey, this can be a good way for owners to take chips off the table. This can be a good way to change the capitalization of the ASC to allow for kind of partner retirement or kind of ownership changes. It can help fuel and fund growth, and so I see a lot of those as great positives for taking on a strategic partner. What are some of the drawbacks that folks should maybe look out for?
No, it's good, and we go through this with everybody who's looking to sell. We kind of do the pros and cons, and what you're looking for specifically. Once we know what their goal is, 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, and to your point, if you're looking at a model and you're looking at ASC and you're saying, "Wow, okay, you guys have done phenomenal work. I think we can find. What do you want to stay on board? Yes, we want to stay on board. Okay, here's the benefits we can find. We can probably get you X amount by the valuation. We feel like this is what the market's yielding. Now you're looking at maybe the right type of partner, whether it be that strategic buyer, that PE buyer, whatever it may be. And I think the things that we say is, what do you want? What do you want out of this after the acquisition? And then let me tell you what you're going to probably be able to maintain if we look down this direction, and what you're going to lose if we go down this direction. And sometimes the losses are not truly losses. I mean, they're things that they don't want to deal with anymore. Like I told them, if you're spending 10%, 15% of your time playing HR manager, that's not something you want to deal with anymore. But at the same time, there's sometimes this loyalty to a lot of the staff, employees. They've been with them for a long time, and especially if they're like office managers or certain positions. Well, sometimes large strategics will come in and they've got people in place for that, so they may not need that position. So these are very candid conversations you need to have. The other thing too is if you've maybe used special vendors, or you've had different things that you've done and been able, or certain arrangements that you've worked out through the years. Well, when you go into that large one size fits all, part of our cost savings is we're going to conform to maybe certain certain payers we're going to be more focused on. That may eliminate some of your existing clients. Hopefully not the goal, but sometimes it works out that way. Actual supply chain, which is huge. So maybe if you've got certain types of vendors that you've always worked with, but yet we've got such a discount with these vendors, you try to accommodate, and maybe the money, the dollar signs just don't add up. It's a great cost savings to take money off. It's sometimes streamlining the business. Or sometimes there's a lot of waste that you find out. I mean, physicians, for the most part, they go to school not to be, MBAs and CPAs. They're there to do other things. And so sometimes you find low hanging fruit that you need to cut, but that low hanging fruit's coveted. It's something maybe they like to do. So these are very candid conversations you have to have. I mean, I've seen some ASCs that throw these really elaborate parties every year for the staff and things like that. And we don't want to take away fun by any means. You want team building, and that's great. But if you made $2 million last year and you threw a $50,000 party, that's probably a little excessive. So it's just little things like that that you kind of be able to walk through the process with them. But again, this is the big step of moving to the next level, and these people can get you somewhere that apparently you were not able to get completely on your own, even though you've built a great company. So allow them to do what they do best, and then you kind of go along with the ride, and you'll be beneficial for it.
Yeah, agree with that. You can have a nice party for $50,000, so that's good.
That's actually a true experience. I've seen it before.
For physician owners that aren't ready to take on a partner or external capital today, but are thinking about it at some point down the line, what should they be thinking about today in terms of getting prepared or maybe future trigger events, which might indicate, hey, this is a good time?
No, great question. I think outside the obvious of, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to enlarge your center? Are you trying to improve the quality of the equipment? And bring in more qualified staff? Whatever you may be trying to do, what is your purpose? I think once you get that done, I think one of the considerations is how do you want to mitigate that debt in a sense of trying to reduce it on your standpoint. Whenever an acquisition comes up, the first thing we look at is what's debt, and that debt comes off the top of whatever they're paying. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It is a clean deal when you do a deal. So if you buy a company for $10 million, and yet they've got $2 million of debt that they have, that $2 million comes off. So that is something that you always want to make sure that you're looking at as far as considering it if you're going to move into it. If you want to spend a lot of money and have that debt, then sometimes finding that partnership may be something you want to move before that happens. Unless it's impeding you from obviously revenue opportunities, I mean, that might be a different story. But with that being said, you do want to have that partner come in, because that's when you would want to acquire that debt, because now you're sharing that debt. And that debt's going to be filtered into the overall valuation plan and the pro forma moving forward. So that's going to be, it's going to be capitalized through maybe 5-7 years. And so that's how I think I would probably best look at it, unless it's something you have to have, in order to perform and do the things you're doing to do. Because again, you're taking all that on yourself, and you're just going to devalue that. You're going to recap that into so many years over time, but that's going to be completely on you when you go to move forward, with an acquisition. So why not try to take some of that off the table immediately? Don't utilize it, and have that be part of the deal, basically part of the negotiation factor moving forward about what is needed to help grow this company. And if you're working with a large company, a professional PE firm, or a large strategic group, they're going to know this too. I mean, they're going to understand these are important factors. So let's say the right one is. So they're going to know it's important factors to go forward. So these are all part of the process of finding the right partner. And I think if you can save some of that initially, that's just less money. It's kind of like building a house, and you add a bunch of stuff to your house that brings no value to it, and and you borrowed against your house to build it, and unfortunately, it's going to be a loss of what you're going to collect. So it's kind of the same principle. You just want to be careful with that.
Got it. Final question for you here, Blake. We do this every week with our guests. What's one thing our listeners can do this week to improve their surgery centers?
Well, I think as a former clinician myself, and I think it's always do no harm. Make sure you're always working to provide the best services for your patient. You're monitoring compliance, risk, you're addressing wrongs, you're addressing all the things that need to be done. If protect your staff, that are your great staff that you may have. Professional nurses, techs are worth their weight in gold, as we all know right now. Take care of your staff, keep them there. Working a bunch of contract people, and not that we've all done it, but it's not the same thing as having people who you can rely on, depend on. I think that's the two factors. So if you're taking care of your patients, you're doing everything right, you're farming everything safe, I do truly believe a lot of the revenue and things will come. And it's just mitigating that process and understanding it. Don't, get what you need to get. Buy what you need to enhance your business. And if you find yourself in a position where, as a physician, that I have a harder time getting in the OR than I did before, then again, start thinking about how you can change that. And sometimes it can be some internal processes, and sometimes it can be what we started our topic about is maybe I need to find a partner to take some of these operational and HR components and some of the things that I find myself being entangled in every day off the table. So I can spend more time doing what I went to 15, 20 years of school to do and focus on that. And I think that, to me, is just a factor of quality of life. And it also helps mitigate, like I said, a lot of the pressures that everybody has to go through when you're running these surgery centers that are very complicated. And there's a lot of processes to get them right. Have someone else take some of that burden off of you. And and look, a happier surgeon is a happier center. So, I think sometimes that's the best combination.
Fantastic. Blake, thanks so much for joining us today.
You're welcome. Thank you very much, Nick. Appreciate it.
As always, it has been a busy week in healthcare, so let's jump right in. First, happy National Nurses Month. I know we're at the end of the months, but it is never too late. Every May, the American Nurses Association recognizes the exceptional work of nurses across the country with their annual Nurses Month celebration. Now, hopefully this is old news and you have been celebrating all the nurses in your life so far, but the theme for 2023 is You Make a Difference, which is designed to highlight the many roles played by nurses in the healthcare system. ANA organized the month into 4 weekly focus areas: self-care, recognition, professional development, and community engagement. So naturally, the ANA offers a lot of suggestions on how you can celebrate this month, but you can also use these ideas anytime during the year as well. And I thought it was really interesting that the ANA has a 9-part gratitude podcast with tools to help make gratitude a daily practice. But they also suggested you can request a proclamation from your local elected officials or state government that declares May as National Nurses Month. You can consider hosting a media event to highlight the roles nurses play in the community, or bestowing an honorary nursing title to a deserving community leader. They also have a ton of resources and a full toolkit right on their website. So we will put a link to that in the episode notes as well. So whether you are a nurse or just know somebody who is, take the time this May to recognize the incredible work that nurses do every day. And thank you, nurses, for everything. The May edition of ASC Focus came out a few weeks earlier this month. And as always, there are a lot of insightful articles, but one that caught my eye that I want to talk about today was all about the use of regional anesthesia. I know that this could be a hot topic with lots of differing opinions, so much so that at the ASCA conference a few weeks ago, they actually had a dedicated session to it. But for this article, a few different ASC leaders were interviewed, and they all shared the same sentiment. By being able to use regional anesthesia, they have been able to increase the number of cases performed, change the types of services that they provide, shorten post-anesthesia care time, reduce the use of narcotics, and most importantly, reduce post-operative pain for patients. I'm going to run through a quick list of tips that the article suggested, but I do highly recommend reading this article in detail. It's really a good one. So if you have not started using regional anesthesia yet, but are considering it, here are a few tips. Find the right anesthesiologist, secure surgeon buy-in, provide the block in pre-op in order to maximize OR time, prioritize patient education, but do not pressure them if they're not comfortable. Stay current as advancements are rolling out all the time. And lastly, just consider this an opportunity and stay open minded. So, to learn even more, we'll link the article in our episode notes as well. In our third story, we are talking about AI again. I feel like we have an article, something else is going on every week about this. But in the world of medical imaging, Google is back at it again, and they are making another big leap forward with its AI technology. The company recently announced that it has developed an AI powered image analysis tool that can be used in a variety of medical imaging applications. The goal is that it can recognize and analyze images of various body parts from x rays to MRIs and provide detailed information to doctors and medical professionals. Um, it's not intended to replace anything, but just to help identify and diagnose conditions more quickly and accurately, leading to better patient outcomes. So while Google's tool is still in the early stages of development, it has the potential to revolutionize the field of medical imaging by making it easier and faster for doctors to analyze images and diagnose conditions. The tool could help improve patient outcomes and reduce healthcare costs. So as the technology continues to develop, it will be interesting to see how it is integrated into the healthcare system and what new applications it will enable. So if you are using AI at all right now, I would love for you to hop over to HST Pathways LinkedIn page and find this blog post or find this LinkedIn post. It'll be at the top and just leave a comment on if you're using it, how you're using it, and maybe some ideas for how you think it might be used in the future. And to end our news segment on a positive note, the FDA on May 3rd approved the first vaccine to prevent RSV, a milestone in the search for a way to protect people from the virus. This shot was developed by the pharmaceutical company GSK, and a Pfizer vaccine for pregnant women and the elderly is nearing approval. Most people with RSV report having mild to moderate cold symptoms, but older people are more vulnerable. And every year, more than 60,000 American seniors end up in the hospital because of RSV. It can also be really serious for babies, which is how I usually think about it. And those who struggle to breathe are often hospitalized in intensive care units because of RSV. So, this is amazing news that a vaccine has been approved, and we'll be keeping a close eye on this story as always. And that news story officially wraps up this week's podcast. Thank you, as always, for spending a few minutes of your week with us. Make sure to subscribe or leave a review on whichever platform you're listening from. I hope you have a great day, and we'll see you again next week.